Alright guys, so welcome to the House of Devlin. I'm Big Al Devlin, and this particular video is going to be discussing the 9 realms that exist within the Viking and Nordic paganistic belief system, but also the significance of why there are 9 realms and how they could also possibly merge. Now what I'm going to do is at the beginning of the video I'm just going to give you the list of the 9 realms, which if any of you have been following these videos you'd be more, or a paganist yourself, you'd be more than familiar with. I don't have to kind of keep ramming that down you guys, so if you want, skip ahead a little bit, but I'm doing that for the benefit of those of you who are perhaps new to Nordic paganism and just want some bite-sized chunk information. Just watch the beginning of this video. I'll give you the 9 realms, roughly what they are about, and then you can kind of tune out and come back to the more advanced discussion when you feel ready, because in my discussion after that what I'll be doing is I'll be talking about how the realms can often merge together to give you weird kind of experiences, and also why the number 9 is very significant within Nordic, well, not just all Nordic paganism, it's not even just paganism, it's in all pre-Christian Germanic peoples. The number 9 has a magical kind of significance, and has been sort of recorded as being very significant in history. Okay, so and that may explain why there are 9 realms, for example. It might not just be, instead of 6 or 7 realms or 8 realms, why there's 9? Well, there's 9 for a very good reason. Okay, so the 9 realms, I'm just going to give you to now. There's Midgard, which is the world of man. That's the material realm. In theory, this is the only physical realm. All the rest are kind of almost like spiritual realms, or if you wish, realms that exist on another dimension, if that's your sort of take on it. I don't try to get into all that kind of sci-fi stuff, but if you want to explain through science the existence of other realms that can kind of coexist at times and then not coexist at other points, then dimensions might be one way to explain it. Okay, but Midgard is the realm that we live on, planet Earth essentially, and it could go beyond planet Earth. It could be literally come to mean, as our knowledge of the realms around us has advanced, it could literally mean our universe itself. The universe that we exist in. Okay. Asgard is the world of the Aesir tribe of gods and goddesses. So this is for Odin, Tyr, okay, Loki. All the big names typically come from Asgard. Then you've got Valheim. This is the world, or the home world, of the Vanir tribe of gods and goddesses. Okay, and these are typically fertility gods or goddesses, and Freya is the most prominent figure probably amongst the Valhenheims or the Vanir, as she is a very powerful practitioner of magic and is a prominent figure in a lot of the stories that the Nords typically tell. You've got Jotunheim, which is the world of the giants, Niflheim, the primordial world of ice, Muspelheim, the primordial world of fire, Alfheim, the world of elves, Svartalfheim, the world of dwarfs, and Helheim, which is hell, okay, the underworld, the land of the dead, okay, no more explanation needed there, we all understand what that is. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I mean, that's where all the simple stuff stops, by the way, guys. So if you just come in for some nice chunky nuggets of information and knowledge, then feel free to leave now. But this is where the advanced discussion of certain aspects of the mythology and the belief system now come in. Okay, so like I said before, Midgard is the only exception of the realms that it is the only physical realm in theory that exists. All the others are almost described as essentially invisible worlds, certainly worlds that can't seem to interact with Midgard apart from under certain circumstances. Okay, now the only way that a human would be able to interact typically with a realm outside of Midgard is when they die and their spirit goes to one of the other realms. For example, let's say you're a brave warrior, you die, and your soul is claimed by Odin, you will go to the halls of Valhalla and then proceed to live in Asgard. Okay, so you interact with Asgard and you've interacted with Midgard, but you can only do that when you die. Okay, however, there are points at times where the realms can interact with Midgard and exert an influence that can give you explanations for some of the weird shit that happens in the world, essentially. The most prominent example of this, of course, if you consider, well, no, before we go into the examples of what can happen, we need to really go back a step and look at the basic structure of Yggdrasil, because the arrangement of the 9 realms is very specific. You can't change their position relative to one another. These realms exist in very specific positions for good reason. Okay, in the bottom section you have the roots of Yggdrasil. Okay, Jotunheim on the sort of my left. Then you've got Helheim directly underneath Midgard. And then you've got Svartalfheim on the right. Okay, in the middle, or the tree trunk section of Yggdrasil, you have directly in the middle Midgard. Okay, and then you'll have Niflheim and Muspelheim on either side. In the heavens, you'll have Asgard directly above Midgard. You have Valheim on the right hand side. On my right hand side is as if you're looking at it on a piece of paper on your right hand side. Okay, and Alfheim on the left hand side. And this is a very specific arrangement. That is the arrangement of all the different realms. There's no interpretation. There's no like, well, really you could change that. No, there's no discussion. That's the arrangement of the realms. Full stop. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's never been an interaction with Midgard with the realms that are in the same section as itself. That is the trunk of the tree. So Midgard has never interacted with Niflheim, and Midgard has never interacted with either Niflheim or Muspelheim. Neither of those realms have interacted with Midgard at any point. And I don't think there's a possibility of it either, apart from maybe during Ragnarok. If I'm wrong on that, or I simply haven't found the information on that, please correct me and put it in the comments. And if you've got links to text or whatever, then please, that'd be fantastic to share. But I'm pretty damn certain there's no interaction within that single plane of existence. However, you do get the roots and the branches, especially those ones that are directly above and directly below Midgard, interacting with Midgard under certain circumstances. And now, this is where your prime example comes in. Helheim is directly underneath Midgard, and the depth or the distance essentially, or the thickness of the veil, whatever, that separates Helheim to Midgard can vary according to certain circumstances. For example, there will be certain places on Earth that are either permanently closer to Helheim, or there are places that appear new places, and old places, as old places disappear, new places will reappear, where the distance between Helheim and Midgard changes and gets thinner, and the two realms can merge slightly and interact. Okay, now there may be permanent sites where, for example, Helheim has merged with Midgard on a permanent basis, but most of the time it does wax and wane. It sort of, there is no real permanent residences, but there are certain areas which are probably more, if not permanent, almost semi-permanent. They're frequent areas where the realms will interact, and these are typically focused around sites of death, such as burial sites, for example. It explains why when you go to a graveyard, you're more likely to see a ghost, or think you see a ghost at least anyway, than you are in your own home watching telly. You don't get a ghost just walk past you, but you do get it in the graveyard. Now, scientists and modern people would be more likely to argue the fact that, well, you're going to the graveyard expecting to see a ghost, or it's in the back of your head you could see a ghost, and so you kind of see what you want to see. But for the Vikings and to the ancient Nords and to many people in the modern world who follow this same belief system, that isn't a good enough answer. What is the right answer is that, well, the realms have merged. The realm of dead has merged at that point with the world of the living, and you get a brief glimpse of the world of the dead. You get to see a torturous soul that lives within Helheim. Okay, and that's probably why they're always moaning, ooh, and all that. Typically in our, urban myths and stuff like that. Okay. Now, Jotunheim is another root realm which has been known to interact with Midgard, at least according to the old texts. Jotunheim will typically interact with areas of vast wilderness. So, if we consider the geography of the planet, the sort of typical areas where you'd expect, well, first of all, you'd expect Antarctica because no one lives there. So who knows? Antarctica might be full of trolls and giants and stuff like that, and none of us would know. Okay, and the interesting thing is, you'd be right to ask, well, wouldn't you expect Niflheim, as I say, to interact with Antarctica, being the primordial world of ice, and Antarctica being, essentially the coldest place pretty much on planet Earth, the most vast expanse of ice out there? Wouldn't you expect interaction of those two realms at that point? And as the answer says no. I don't know of any times when Niflheim or Muspelheim interacts with Midgard. Maybe it does. Maybe Niflheim does interact with the North or South Poles. Maybe Muspelheim interacts with areas where there's a lot of volcanic activity, for example. I don't know, but it's never been mentioned in the texts anywhere that I can find. So I'm only trying to give you facts here, guys. But Jotunheim is known to act to merge with areas of wilderness. And I just brought up Antarctica because, well, it is a barren place. But other places would, of course, be maybe the savannah, for example, in Africa, or certain areas of the savannah in Africa, the dunes and stuff. You've got the outback in Australia, prime example. No one lives there. Nothing lives there. You can't live there. There's not enough water to live. Okay, and so chances of coming across a giant possibly in those locations, or a troll or something, yeah, okay, there's a possibility, and obviously then you got areas like certain areas of Canada, for example, and stuff like that, where there's just vast wilderness. Humans just don't simply live there, or if they do, they're so sparsely populated that Jotunheim is able to kind of almost merge and sort of get it more of a grip on our own material realm. So that's a recorded sort of interaction. The only other interaction that I know of is, of course, with heavens. Okay, so directly above us is Asgard, that you consider essentially to be heaven, and Asgard can interact with Midgard. Not only through the Bifrost, that's an exception to the rule, but it can also interact in the same way that the root realms that I've just explained. It can interact through the sky. Okay, and so for example, a lot of people believed that when it rained, that was Thor having intercourse with his wife, and the rain coming down was his sperm, and that would fertilize the soil and allow crops to grow, whilst he was also inseminating his wife. So there's that. There's also the fact that when you're on say a Viking raid on a long ship, and you're going out and there's stormy seas, and you suddenly see this thunder strike, something really amazing, this huge bang and a big flash of light and stuff. You think, wow, that's amazing. How do you explain that? We can go, well, that's Asgard. Asgard that is Thor in Asgard striking his anvil with his hammer because he's happy. He's happy that we're on our Viking raids. He's showing his happiness for us with his lightning and his thunder. He's warning our enemies that we're coming. So that's the way that as I say, you always got to look at these kind of religions try to, at least, through the eyes of someone who lived 1,000 years ago, and that's how they would have explained unexplainable stuff, and it still works today. If I saw a ghost, I might explain it as, well, that's where the spirit realms, i.e. Helheim, have interacted with this world, the world of the living. It's quite a logical explanation, in my opinion. Don't know if you agree. Now, I did promise, obviously, to discuss also the significance of the number 9. Why are there 9 realms? Well, the number 9 has a magical significance in almost, if not all, pre-Christian Germanic peoples. So that includes the Celts, the Nords, the original British tribes, everyone essentially had the number 9 within their belief system, meaning of a certain significance. And there are prime examples within the religious side of it that show the number 9 cropping up again and again and again and again so often that it simply cannot be coincidence. There are 9 realms for starters. Then when Odin hung himself and made the self-sacrifice to try and gain rune sight, to gain wisdom, he hung himself from the windy tree for a period of 9 nights. A god called Heimdallr was born to 9 mothers. Most of the gods, when they get married, they have a betrothal time, essentially of 9 nights. It's repeated in there again. Typically, when certain gods visit certain locations on a repetitive manner, they do it every 9 days. They reappear every 9 days, every 9 nights. Something along these lines is when they will appear or continue to reappear. And of course, one of the most important examples is Thor. Okay, when he fights Jormungandr during Ragnarok, Thor kills Jormungandr during Ragnarok. However, during the fight, he was bitten by Jormungandr, and Jormungandr had very poisonous venom in his fangs. And as Thor walked away from Jormungandr's dead body, triumphant in victory, it took him 9 steps before he dropped down dead. 9 steps, and then he dropped down dead. So number 9 is very important. It's also important not just in the stories about the gods, but also within the sort of feasts and celebrations that were typically had by a lot of the ancient peoples. When they had sacrificial feasts particularly, they would have it last for 9 days, and there would normally be 9 sacrifices or victims, depending on your point of view. Whether they were sacrifices or victims, that's your point of view, really. But yeah, there would be 9 sacrifices over 9 days. And so the number 9 has this major significance. Now, the only real sort of guess, and it is a guess, but it's a very good guess in my opinion, that the reason the number 9 is so important to these ancient people is simply the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar, and bear in mind, these people were seafaring people who knew the stars. They could read the stars, they knew the constellations, and they knew the lunar cycle as well. And they would have intuitively known it. They wouldn't have to work things out. They would be so familiar with it, especially the ones who did, who were like Vikings, for example, who did rely on that kind of knowledge to be able to navigate and make planned attacks and stuff. These people were very, very familiar with the lunar calendar, and the lunar calendar is 27 days. Now, you might be asking me, well, that's not 9 days, but it is a multiple of 9. It's 3 lots of 9, and so that's the only guess. That's the only, all the scholars who have tried to interpret the significance of the number 9 believe 9 to be related to the lunar calendar in some way. Of course, I think that's 4 phases of the moon, so you can't, I don't know, or is there 3 main phases of the moon? I'm not sure. If there is 3 main phases of the moon, that kind of answers it. 9 days for each phase of the moon, but I think there's more than that. But anyway, I just wanted to give you that little insight, and if you know more about that, or more about why the number 9, is it right? Is it to do with the lunar cycle? Do you know of the merging of the realms? Have you experienced it yourself, or do you know that Muspelheim and Niflheim can merge with Midgard, and if so, how? Then please let me know, because they're the gaps in my knowledge and I'd like to fill them. And I hope you found the video useful and informative. I'll see you soon.